Alright guys, thanks a lot for tuning in to News World Order with me, Mr. Brit Destruct, and thanks a lot to my new subscribers. I hope you enjoy my videos. I'm just going to look at a few stories that have caught my eye in the last few days. The first is about this white American woman who's been using the name Jihad Jane. A woman accused of recruiting Muslim terrorists on the internet in a plot to kill a Danish cartoonist who drew an offensive picture of Muhammad. I said in my video entitled Something Brewing from a couple of months ago that this was the way things were going to go, and that we were going to see terrorist attacks blamed on cleanskins, as they're called, meaning white people who don't fit the stereotype of a Muslim extremist. Seems like something's brewing, folks. And if something does go bang, it's probably going to be a Western-looking woman. A clean skin. Keep your eyes open. And that's exactly what we've seen with this Jihad Jane. In fact, there's been another woman pulled in by the cops just yesterday in Ireland. Another American woman who the media have been very quick to point out was blonde-haired. You know, the fear's being ramped up, guys. We've been accused of being terrorists recently, and now basically anyone's a potential terrorist. You know, it doesn't matter what your skin colour it is, doesn't matter what your political affiliations are, anyone's a terrorist now. This leads me on to my second story. I don't know whether you remember the CNN news story that I posted at the end of my last video, where a guy was basically saying that 9/11 truthers and conspiracy theorists were nut jobs, potential murderers. This guy's called John Avlon.
Well, what we know about the writings he's made online is that it does fit some of the types, some of the tropes that we've seen throughout the first year of Obama in particular. A lot of the conspiracy theories. Of course, 9/11 conspiracy theory goes back to the Bush era. But this anti-government fervor, which has really been stoked on the internet with particular intensity in the last year, he does follow. But it's a mistake to try to shoehorn him into any one ideology or to make him fit any existing narrative, especially a partisan political narrative. What's very clear is that this is a very disturbed individual who's drunk very deeply out a lot of the hate and paranoia that's being sold on the internet by a lot of these conspiracy entrepreneurs. And that's what happens when you use hate as a cheap and easy recruiting tool, but it can lead to violence, especially when the folks who are drinking it are kind of unstable to begin with.
So I decided to do a little bit of research into the guy because I took an immediate disliking to him. He just screamed scumbag to me. He was accusing us of being the hateful ones, but it was him that was actually trying to spread hate and fear with his ridiculous attempts to enter terms like the Patriot movement and right-wing politics into the political discourse. I just thought he seemed like a real scumbag. So I looked him up and he was the former chief speechwriter for Rudy Giuliani. Of course, I'm sure most of you know who Rudy Giuliani is, but just for people who don't, he was the mayor of New York at the time of the 9/11 attacks, and he's since made millions based on his actions that day. He's basically made himself out to be, the hero of the day. But the truth of the matter is, his actions before 9/11 actually led to the deaths of many firefighters that day, because he was responsible for the communication systems that the police and the fire service used, and apparently these just didn't work properly, and that was totally his fault, and they didn't get the warnings to evacuate the towers in time. And he was also responsible for saying afterwards that the air was safe to breathe. He was one of these people who went around claiming that the toxic, soup of chemicals and gases and dust was perfectly safe to breathe. It's just completely disgusting what he was responsible for. And he made himself out to be, as I say, the hero of the day since then. Made so much money. Another interesting fact about Giuliani, and a highly suspicious fact, is that he claimed to have had foreknowledge of the collapse of the Twin Towers, which is obviously, highly suspicious because a steel frame building had never collapsed because of fire before, and there was no reason for anyone to think that the towers were going to collapse. He's since backtracked from this, but in the clip I'm going to play now, you'll see that he clearly states that he knew the building was going to come down.
I went down to the scene and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of emergency management. And we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we could actually get out of the building. So we were trapped in the building for 10, 15 minutes and finally found an exit and got out, walked north, and took a lot of people with us.
So the question obviously is, how did he know that building was going to collapse? And the second question being, if he knew that, why didn't he get the firefighters out? Well, obviously because they were using communication systems that didn't work properly, which was his fault. So Giuliani's a complete scumbag, and this John Avlon is, also a complete scumbag. Remember this guy's face, because he's obviously trying to make a name for himself by demonising people who question things such as the 9/11 attacks, which is completely outrageous when his former boss was responsible for the deaths of so many people that day. This leads me on to the third story, which is about the people who were victims of the toxic air and the toxic dust during the cleanup on 9/11. Again, loads of people. It's estimated to be 70,000 people who were involved in the cleanup because they thought that the air was safe to breathe and they weren't made to wear respirators. This was down to Giuliani, one of the people anyway. So there's been a deal reached to pay off some of the people who, are literally dying from various illnesses, various cancers and, respiratory illnesses. But only 10,000 people are going to be given cash out of, as I say, an estimated 70,000. It's a pathetic amount, really. I'll just read out a couple of quotes which show the reaction of some of the people who are suffering from that day to this pitiful attempt to buy the silence of the people who were, basically given a death sentence that day. I mean, people are just, dying left, right and centre. They're basically trying to shut these people up. The people have to accept what they've been offered and agree to not pursue legal action. So it's just an attempt to silence them off with a pitiful amount of money, really. That's it for today, guys. Look forward to your comments, and as always, good to speak to you, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.